I'm so grossed out by this reaction to the murder of this insurance company CEO. And it's pretty widespread on the left, how they are lionizing the alleged murderer. And I mentioned Taylor Lorenz because she's pretty indicative of it. She worked for the New York Times. She worked for the Washington Post. She was fired by the Washington Post this fall when she posted on her Instagram, Joe Biden is a war criminal. When they chastised her for posting such a thing as a so-called reporter, she denied she had done it and claimed she'd been hacked. They fired her, not believing her excuse. And then a month or so later, she definitely posted on her social media, Joe Biden is a war criminal, kind of removing the mystery about whether it had been her the first time. And now this woman is all over online on her Substack and elsewhere trying to justify this man's murder, and goes on with Piers Morgan on his YouTube show last night saying the following.
I do believe in the sanctity of life. And I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, because it feels like...
Serious?
I mean...
Joy in a man's execution?
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy.
He's a father,
billions,
and he's being gunned down in the middle of Manhattan. Why does that make you joyful?
Of Americans that he murdered. So are the tens of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, who died because greedy health insurance executives like this one push policies of denying care to the most vulnerable people.
So should they all be killed then? Should they all be killed, these healthcare executives? Would that make you even more joyful?
No.
Joyful, or even to say you're not empathetic about somebody losing their life when they leave behind two young boys.
Yeah, Taylor, I don't mean to be rude, but why the fuck are you laughing all the time? I don't get it. Sorry, apologies for my language, but honestly, I find it unbelievable. What are you laughing at?
I am laughing at Tommy's insane mischaracterization of why people are angry.
Okay. Your thoughts on it, Heather?
Wow, we have a real problem in this country. The left has a real problem. I found it, in a sense, frustrating to hear you initially, Megyn, rebutting the claim that this was somehow a justified act, because it seemed like it's tragic that we have to concede that much to even engage with these people. It should be so patently obvious that you're not allowed to kill because you disagree with somebody politically, and to even engage in that argument is to concede too much. But obviously we need to. Let's recall, these are the same group of intersectional allies that also celebrated October, the Hamas attacks. There's something that has gone fundamentally wrong with the left's understanding about some basic moral truths, which is you don't get to narcissistically kill some figurehead because you feel like you're in pain after back surgery, and you don't get to kill on the basis of political beliefs. But we also have assassinations on Trump. This is being a poison that's being bred in the universities, which proceeds with a Manichaean worldview about the evil of anything associated with capitalism, with anything associated with Western civilization, and that glorifies alleged victims, alleged marginalized, and clearly is very closely positioned to the next step, which is that it's okay to kill. Lorenz is basically a mainstream media figure.
Yeah, and is giving voice to what we've seen all over the internet, thirsting after this guy and celebrating his looks and counting him as some sort of courageous guy, as I say, who shoots a man dead in the street, an unarmed man in the back. In the left's world, this is courage. Here is that guy, Tim Miller, who couldn't find the stones, Heather, to ask Doug Emhoff, who he had right across from him, right after the story broke that he had, according to his ex-girlfriend, slapped her with an open hand across the face so hard outside of a festival in Cannes, France, that she spun. This is like a year before he got together with Kamala Harris. He couldn't find the stones to ask him the question, would you like to respond to that? Is it true that you hit this woman? You who are being lauded by the left as the new version of masculinity, non-toxic, the way the Republican version is. This guy, Tim Miller, couldn't find the stones to ask him those questions. But here he is today with his thoughts about this alleged killer of CEO Brian Thompson?
There's a lot to unpack here, including his six-pack would be among the things you need to unpack.
He did post yes. Yeah.
This is a very attractive man, and I am attracted to the shooter. And I do, and I have to just say, not exactly my type. I mean, objectively handsome.
I think once you kill someone,
not exactly my type. Yeah. I like in that category. Kind of the Boston Marathon bomber was kind of a little bit more in my wheelhouse.
He works for the Bulwark.
I mean, we I have to feel sometimes that the anarchism of the early 20th century, that we're past that kind of solipsistic embrace of evil and of the notion that you have a right to go around killing people that you disagree with, we're certainly never going to return to that degree of contagious insanity. But listening to this, I don't know, we are moving in that direction. This is not, and it's not even an underground movement. The anarchists were understood as enemies of the state, and they did everything they could to cover their tracks and cover their propaganda to a certain extent, although they were also out there leafleting. But their homicidal intentions were not exactly out in the open. But these are people that are going onto social media, the most public realm in the world, and proclaiming that they don't have a problem with murder. I lack the language, Megyn, to really describe as in a sort of a Cassandra-like position what may be going on here. We all thought that there was a course correction with the Trump election, and people are saying no more with the identity-based grievance, which this is related to in a certain way. But we clearly have a very, very long road to tread to get back to some kind of shared value system. I mean, the irony, you mentioned the Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely verdict, that this killer is being described as a hero, and then an actual hero was being treated as a homicidal criminal and villain. We're living in an upside down world, at least to the extent that you live in the elite bubble ideology.
I have a lot for you on Daniel Penny today, which we'll do next. But you're exactly right. I mean, I think the Trump election was a declaration that the normies are with us. We've reclaimed the normies who were leftist adjacent, open-minded to self-flagellation as required by BLM and the trans activists. Like, okay, if that's what I need to do to be a good person, I'm open, I'm listening. And now they've just been completely rejiggered to normalcy. Wait a minute, you people are the loons. We're not doing that. We're not opening the border. I'm going back with the side of reason. I think they're back with us, but it doesn't mean the loons went away. They're still a part of the Democrat Party, and they're vocal, and they're not giving 1 inch. Taylor Lorenz is one example of that, but they're all over CNN and MSNBC in the wake of Penny, which is the other big story today, saying all the things you'd expect them to say about how we've normalized vigilantism. The same people. Right. They see him as this. We're celebrating a vigilante in the case of Penny, but on the CEO Brian Thompson, you've got some of those same people saying, "Right on." The guy had some good points.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I hope that there's more people like Piers Morgan out there in the mainstream media that are distancing themselves from these views, because if they're not, you're allowing it to stay out there unrebutted, and it's. I think Trump is under constant threat of another assassination to the extent that you whip people up. And of course, let's be fair. The left probably thinks that the right's rhetoric is just as unhinged and just as dangerous, just as apocryphal and unduly Manichaean, that could give rise to right-wing kooks. And there's always a risk about directly linking rhetoric to action. There should be a very, very wide berth for politically extreme rhetoric. As long as you're not calling for violence, it's not clear that anybody that embraces a certain kind of discourse should be held responsible for somebody who acts out in the name of that discourse. So both sides view the other. as engaged in completely unhinged rhetoric. Nevertheless, I don't think there's anything comparable. I mean, maybe there is. Maybe there's some right-wing kooks that are justifying in advance using violence against people you disagree with. But we've seen young people have completely lost understanding of the First Amendment. They do not understand fundamental principles of discourse, of the free market of ideas, that the best way to counter ideas that you disagree with is to argue against them. You don't silence people. You don't arrogate to yourself the power of censorship. So that's bad enough that we've lost sight of that fundamental principle of democracy, a principle that has given power to the marginalized throughout the ages. You have Frederick Douglass saying the thing that tyrants fear most is freedom of the press, because it allows those who oppose slavery to throw off their chains. Now you have the left opposing the freedom of the press. But it's even worse than that. It's even worse. Now you have the left saying, thou shalt kill people who you think are denying services because you have a certain view of health insurance. This is a principle that is going to lead to a complete civil war.
For those of us who have been holding our breath for the past several months, waiting for this election, we can finally exhale. Work can now be done on the major issues this country's facing, one of the most significant being our national debt. The fact is our nation's broke, and that debt is a house of cards that cannot be quickly dismantled. So the strategy for you probably remains the same when it comes to your investments. You might want to diversify your savings. This is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control, so it can be important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group can help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Text MK to 989898 to get your free info kit on gold. Plus, right now you will receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold and text MK to 989898 to claim your eligibility for free silver today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.